Good evening. It is now 6:30, and I will call the Monday, December 12th, 2016 Burnsville Planning Commission to order. Commissioners, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate you coming out on one of our first really cold nights. Staff, thanks for the trip all the way across the hall.
You're welcome.
The first thing on our agenda this evening is the adoption of this evening's agenda. Commissioners, do you have any changes to the posted agenda? None from commissioners? Staff, any
No
changes? Hearing none, I would stand for moved by, moved by Commissioner Benke, second by Commissioner Workman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. The second item this evening is the approval of the minutes from our November 28th, 2016 Planning Commission. Commissioners, do you have any revisions to the minutes? Any questions? Staff, any changes?
No changes.
Hearing no changes, I would stand for a motion. Moved
moved.
by Commissioner
Second.
Levy, second by Commissioner Singh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and one abstention. That brings us to the third item on our agenda this evening, and our third item is a public hearing. It's an application of the City of Burnsville for a conditional use permit amendment to allow a monopole tower with antenna with an overall height of 101 feet and preliminary final plat of one lot subdivision known as North River Hills Park, located at 11501 19th Avenue South. Our presenter this evening is Ms. Garros. Ms. Garros, thank you for your time. You have the floor.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. We have folks here in the audience this evening. The application before you is a multi-layer application. We've got the conditional use permit, and that is to allow a wireless communications tower within the park zoning district at North River Hills Park. Also, we have the public hearing for the preliminary plat that is always held at the Planning Commission level. And the reason for the plat is that the park is made up of 6 different parcels of land. And because of the conditional use permit is a land use clearance, the council has a policy, and as we have in our ordinance, that the parkland be platted. So we're looking at combining the existing properties into a lot to be known as North River Hills Park. The map on the screen shows the parkland, and this you can identify the various different parcels of property that make up the park. It's surrounded by single-family residential, primarily along the west and the north, and then we have single-family and apartments on the south and southeast, and some commercial property, B1 zone property as well. This graphic shows a little bit more detail. We've got the park outlined and the individual parcels. One thing I'd like to draw the attention to the Planning Commission is we'll be talking about a gap in the legal descriptions for the property, which is in this location, and it also continues on to the west as well, but this is location of that property gap that we'll be discussing in a few moments. The application is to install a new tower to replace an existing light pole within the park. This is a site plan, and it's there's not a lot of detail because it's really a fairly straightforward project. This is the area of the park where the pickleball and tennis courts are located, and the proposal is to install or to replace an existing light fixture with a new monopole from the city of Burnsville that will be used for the purposes of rolling out a new communications program where the city will be monitoring and administering water meter information digitally through this communications equipment. This is one site of 4 in the city. The other 4 sites are located on city water towers. There's not a water tower or another tower within a half a mile of this site that meets the height requirement of the 90 feet for this communication structure. So the city is following the city council policy for locating towers in parks and is proposing to replace the existing light post with a tower. Just to the west, on the other side of the court, there is an existing T-Mobile monopole, which was approved, I believe, in 2006. It's 50-foot tall. At that point in time, this was also a replacement for an existing light pole. The area that we are looking at, actually north, would be to the left on the screen. And this is the monopole that I indicated, that is the 50-foot tall tower. And the light fixture that's proposed to be replaced in this location with the new tower for city purposes. This graphic shows what this is called a photo simulation, basically a pictorial representation of what the tower would look like. On the tower, you'll see about midpoint, there are the lights that will be taken from the existing light pole and situated on this tower. The tower itself is 90 feet, and that's above ground level. And then there is an 11-foot tall, it's an omnidirectional or pole type antenna. And that's 11 feet tall. However, there is a 2-foot overhang. So although the report indicates that the overall height with the tower and antenna will be 101 feet, actually because of that 2-foot overhang, the total height is 99 feet. So I'm going to make that correction. The pole is very similar. There is a very similar pole out here just outside City Hall. It's a standard type of pole that's used by many different industries, basically 11 feet tall, and it's called an omnidirectional antenna. Basically spreads the communication signal and receives signals from all around the circumference of the tower. The pickleball court on this is the preliminary plat, and it is, there's a lot of things going on here. Basically, we're looking at combining all the separate parcels into one lot. The preliminary plat shows existing conditions, including topography and the existing infrastructure and park facilities. There's a large, over 200 stall parking lot here. North River Hills Park is a very active park. The entire site is, I believe, about 42 acres of land involved. And what we're talking about, this is the existing tennis court and pickleball court. This would be the existing T-Mobile tower, and the proposed city tower will be located on the east side of the courts. The North River Hills Park, one of the items that we had found, unfortunately, after we had advertised this, is that in North River Hills Park, there are a couple of parcels, notably outlots F and G of Mill Pond Edition, which is to the south. And those two parcels actually were part of a plan unit development that dates back to 1972. And with the platting of the property, we do need to hold a public hearing to rezone this part that was PUD, because once the plat is done and all of the parcels are combined into one parcel, there won't be a legal description anymore for that part of the PUD. The PUD is very general. It basically indicated at the time, before even Mill Pond Second Edition, which is directly to the south, was developed, it showed a general PUD for apartment buildings, and then to the north was to be open space. The park, especially these two outlots, F and G, are part of that park system. Outlot G is located just north of 117th Street, and this would be about the southern boundary of the park. So we would be looking at, we need to publish to rezone Outlot G and then Outlot F, which is about the southern half of the park, to remove that planned unit development designation, so it would just be zoned park. Then the entire park is zoned the same. We'll need to publish and send out public hearing notices to property owners for that. So what staff is requesting this evening is, because we'd already published for the conditional use permit and the plat, that the Planning Commission open the public hearing and take the public testimony from folks that are here this evening, and then continue this meeting to the January 9th Planning Commission meeting so that we can publish the rezoning for those two outlots and the amendment to the Mill Pond planned unit development, basically to just change the designation of those two outlots from park/PUD to just park. The final plat is also included within the packet. Generally, the Planning Commission doesn't review, and we don't need to have a public hearing on the final plat. The way plats work is you have the preliminary plat, that's where the public hearing is held, that's where Planning Commission has the discretion, and that's where folks can provide input. And then with a final plat, we do route them to the Planning Commission, but generally the only approval is at the council level for a final plat, and all that needs to happen is the final plat needs to be consistent with the preliminary plat. So we do include it with the packet, but it's not something that you need to hold the public hearing on as far as the final plat. This gives you an idea what the final plat will look like. It's a little less complex than the preliminary plat because the topographic information isn't shown. But primarily here we've got the outline of the park. Oops, I'm sorry, goes down to here to 117th Street. This is Outlot G. There's an access to the park at this location, comes around. There's an access to the park. Actually, it's from city property that abuts State Highway 13. And then we've got the north part of the park and back down to the beginning again. The plan shows the existing access easement. And this is for the tower, the existing tower for T-Mobile to have their access and utilities. So that is shown on the final plat. And then in addition to that, as we indicated in the report, there is actually a gap in the legal descriptions in this location. It's called and shown as detail A in the preliminary plat. This is a situation where there is a discrepancy between how properties were described traditionally, that the legal descriptions don't close to an existing parcel. When this happens, and there are several cases in the city where we have this, the city attorney will be working on a separate action. It does not need to hold up the plat, but it is a separate action. It's called an action for quiet title, in which we work with the Dakota County courts, and they establish who the ownerships should be and how to resolve that particular gap. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. The map on the right shows the existing zoning. Again, we've got the entire park parcel here. And the zoning where the slashes are shown is the PUD zoning. And Mill Pond actually consists of all of these properties, including part of the park. So this is where the 1972 PUD was established for these properties. And this is the area in green, which we will need to hold a public hearing to amend the plat, or excuse me, amend the PUD for Mill Pond to remove this area from the PUD and to rezone it then from PUD to just straight park. Then the entire park will have consistent zoning throughout. This is the easement that I referred to. Actually, north is again to the left, and this is the existing easements that are in place for the existing T-Mobile tower. The recommendation from staff, as I had indicated, is that the conditional use permit for towers and antennas meets all of the requirements of the ordinance, all of the setbacks, the height, and other elements of the tower and antenna ordinance are met by the application. The application has gone to the Parks and Natural Resource Commission. They reviewed the application on November 21st. That is part of the policy for any time telecommunications towers proposed in a park. the Parks and Natural Resource Commission needs to evaluate it. And then they provide a separate recommendation to the city council. The planning commission will have your own recommendation as well. There was a neighborhood meeting that was held on October 11th, 2016. No one came in to speak at that meeting, but there was one held, again, that follows the park policy. And at this point, the recommendation from staff is to open the public hearing, ask any questions. We do have our IT person here, Chris Lania, who's very familiar with the entire project and can address or explain more about the need for the tower. And then the recommendation is to continue this public hearing to your January 9th meeting and allow us to submit the required notices and come back for the rezoning and the PUD amendment on January 9th. With that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. Commissioners, questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Levy.
Thank you. With antenna poles, isn't there a utility building necessary adjacent to it for power and transmitters and so forth? I didn't see that there.
Yeah, actually, with this particular tower, there's not a need for that. Communication towers that, like for Sprint and Verizon, AT&T, they do usually have ground equipment, which may or may not need to be inside a building. There is actually an equipment compound by the T-Mobile site that was approved as part of that. In this case, for the city's antenna, there is an existing electrical panel that's there. That may need to be adjusted or moved, but that's the only equipment that's needed. There's not additional ground equipment needed for this city communications site.
Commissioner Levy, other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions of staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Benke.
Thank you, Chair. Deb, typically when you have a PUD for, in this case, Mill Pond, and they are leaving outlots for open space, that open space is required as part of the PUD. How is that addressed here?
It is, the use will not change. It continues to be, it's dedicated as public open space.
Okay, but
So
that-
it will continue to be that.
That is the key, is that it's not Mill Pond's property that is current, it was dedicated to the city as part of the park.
Correct. The city is the owner of outlots G and F.
It's just part of that PUD.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions, staff? Of staff? Would anyone like to speak to the IT department? We could have Mr. Slania come up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'd like to.
Commissioner Singh, Mr. Slania, could you please step up to the podium and give us your name and address for the record? Oh, no, I guess you don't have to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, Chris Slania, I'm with the IT department. I'm the project coordinator for this, this tower. Couple things I'd like to point out is, as Deb indicated, this would be a city-owned operated tower. This is not something we're constructing to lease to wireless carriers. It's gonna be minimal in the amount of equipment that's up there. Compared to other towers that might have cell equipment with those large 5, 6, 8-foot panels, the rectangular panels, the satellite dishes, et cetera. That's not gonna be on this tower. We're not addressing it in the construction, so even moving forward, the engineering of the tower is not gonna be able to withstand those weights. So this would be a singular collection point for the automated meter infrastructure, AMI project the city's rolling out. We did pursue other options. We had hoped the existing 3 water towers would cover this north end of the city. We thought possibly we could put some equipment on that existing T-Mobile tower that's already on site. Unfortunately, none of those reached the height that we needed to span really to the north and the east. The Cedar Bridge neighborhood and all the homes north of here is really what this antenna is doing. Let's see. And lastly, as you pointed out, there would be no ground equipment with this. There will be some other infrastructure going in. Should the project move forward, the city will be bringing fiber optics out to this park, which really does two things for us. It will direct City Hall, connect City Hall directly to that pole, so we're collecting everything that's coming from that whip antenna down the pole into our software system. It also gives the city the ability to provide public Wi-Fi out to that park for, parents who are hanging around waiting for ball games to start or whatever. It'll give staff the ability to check for weather updates, spring and summer storms. It will also give the city the ability to provide some security cameras out at the park. Some of our city parks have cameras in place now. Right now, North River Hills doesn't, and we'll be able to provide some of that infrastructure, not only to the pole that we saw, but also there's a recreational shelter that's there that's out available for rent, for parties and things like that, and provide some of those amenities. With that, Commissioners, I don't have anything else to add unless there's questions.
Thanks, Chris. Questions? I think we need to have some questions
I
for
do,
him.
I do.
Okay. Commissioner Benke has a question for you, Mr.
Certainly.
Mr. Slaney, so the height of this tower is 100 feet. I'm assuming if you're getting all the way down to Cedar Bridge, it's not a line of sight issue.
That is correct.
So even South River Hills, top of the hill, over the hill, there's really no issue, and your coverage goes that far from here.
Yes, it does. Interestingly enough, when we, or I shouldn't say we, I wasn't even involved when it started to roll out. There's a water tower in Prior Lake. I believe it's the edge of Prior Lake or Savage. That's right off of 42. That is actually the top of that tower is higher in elevation than any of the towers we have in the city of Burnsville. We were considering getting a collection antenna on that water tower that would have encompassed all of Burnsville. The height was there, but digging into it more, the backup capability, should that antenna go down, the duplication, when they paint, when they maintain that water tower, if that was our only site, the whole system goes down. So not only does it give it the height to the north, but it gives us duplication and repetition to the south end of Burnsville, should lightning strike or whatever happen with those other sites.
You could always put a water tower back in South River Hills and you could use that. Thank you.
Chris, how many other parks do we have that have Wi-Fi? Do we have a lot? Have you studied that in your time with
We
it?
have less than 5.
Okay.
I want to think maybe just 2 or 3 currently.
Mr. Commissioner Singh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, when you left the Planning Commission, I know you will do well in technology, and I remember the days when people were coming in to read our water meter. And then you had drive-by reading. And you have only gone over there for a year or so, now since you moved from
Almost
planning.
exactly a year now, yep,
And you're gonna be reading our water meter from this tower.
correct.
I have to give it to you. You have done a remarkable job.
I can't take much credit for this. I came on late in the game simply because we needed this tower to get it in. But it is a software system that's going to be very beneficial to the city and residents, with almost instantaneous reads multiple times within an hour. If there's a water main break and you're on vacation in Florida, we'll know that very quickly rather than the days or weeks sometimes where those pipes would run in somebody's house and they didn't know about it.
I'm glad you're navigating this to fruition. I'm sure it will benefit the residents of Burnsville, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, this antenna is a passive antenna then. It's collecting, each of our water meters is going to send data out to the ether, and the antenna will just pick it up.
Correct, correct. Each of the meters that goes in residential, commercial, industrial properties will have a regular radio frequency that it's transmitting on. I can't tell you how often, it's not a constant, but there will be some transmission back to all 4 of these sites.
So is there an antenna that comes out of the house if the meter is buried in the basement?
That's a great question, Commissioners. It is not line of sight. It is based on the frequency by which it's traveling, and I don't know all the details, otherwise I'd share those with you, but it's not line of sight. Homeowners that get these new meters are not gonna notice really any change. There's gonna be no exterior changes to their structure.
Commissioner Levy, I would like to instruct everybody to, if you go to burnsville.org, there is a video that describes the process, the replacement of the meter, where the transmitter will go as high as they can in the basement, and it kind of walks you through. And then I don't know, the neighborhood that I live in, we got our notifications last week saying it was going to start. So I would encourage everybody to go to look at that, to understand the
Thank you.
process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Actually,
Swain.
Mr.
Oh,
Chair,
I'm
can I ask
sorry.
one question? When you mentioned the water breaking, Chris, is the system administered by the city, or is it a outsourced administration system?
The system is operated simply manned by the city. We do have a third-party vendor that's providing us the software, the technology that's doing it, but city staff will be the ones collecting, analyzing the data. We'll be getting the notices should alarms go off or whatever thresholds we have, that's coming right to City Hall, right to city staff.
I guess the reason for my question is when you mentioned that if a pipe breaks, I mean, the city's not advertising, hey, we're doing this because if your pipes break, now we'll tell you if they're broken.
No,
And they're
that is,
accepting
it's
that
not
liability.
I wouldn't say we're gonna be on call monitoring this 24 hours a day, but it is another tool we have to catch that more quickly.
And in that scenario, I mean, there's not this does not serve that purpose, but if that scenario were to happen, is a homeowner gonna get an email or a phone call if that were to happen, or is the city just shutting off the water source to that home electronically, or?
If those details are determined, I don't know them yet.
Okay.
There's gonna be multiple options. I do know homeowners will be able to log in, set up their own accounts and things like that, monitor daily, weekly usage, things like that, and they'll be, through those portals, there'll be email addresses and cell phone numbers and all that collected. You're exactly right to say the intent of the system is not to catch those breaks, or prevent them or necessarily reach out to the resident, but that is a good byproduct of this, as well as conservation. You know, some of the larger industrial, commercial sites, I think if property owners or apartment managers had this at their disposal, they'd be watching things a little more carefully.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? This is a public hearing, so at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item to step up to the podium and give us your name and address for the record. Seeing no one in the audience going to speak, asking or stepping up to speak to the item, we will continue this public hearing until January 9th, where we will continue to discuss the preliminary plat. Ms. Garros, do you have any other questions for us, or would you like us to continue?
You can continue. We
Okay.
will be sending notices out regarding the rezoning and the PUD amendment. So property owners will receive that, and then in addition, that will be published. And then this entire application will come back before you on January 9th.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Singh.
do we need a motion to continue it, or just? you can
Do we-
do that?
You should make a motion to
Okay,
continue, yes.
and then anything else? That's why I guess anything else you need from us, okay. Commissioners, I would stand for a motion to continue the public hearing to January 9th.
So move, Mr. Chair. I move that the Planning Commission continue this matter at the next regular Planning Commission meeting scheduled for January 9th, 2017.
We have a motion on the floor. We have a second by Commissioner Benke. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Slaney. Have a good evening. Brings us to item number 4 this evening, and this is also a public hearing. It's an application for Burnsville Warehouse 1 for a conditional use permit and variance to allow an outdoor display pad at 12112 and 12122 12th Avenue South. I don't think I messed that up.
It
You
is
got
a
all the
tongue
ones in
twister.
Ms. Garros, you have the floor.
Thank you. The subject site that we will be working with this evening is a single lot. It's located in the I-1 Industrial Park zoning district, north of Highway 13. The adjacent properties are zoned I-1 on all sides, with the exception of Tri-State Bobcat, which is just to the right across 12th Avenue, and that's zoned B3, and it is also a planned unit development. The pictometry gives you an idea. This is in our established industrial park, and the applicant owns a building. They have been the owner of the building, I believe, since about 1996. Records date back to 1966, when the property was platted, that the building, this building and a couple of others within this plat had been constructed even prior to the plat. There is part of the subject site, you'll see actually to the north, part of the driveway from this site is located on the property of the applicant. There was a vacation of drainage and utility easement and a correction made to the plat back in 1966. And this is within that correction area. So it's part of the vacation area. So even though it appears that this is on here, it's actually within the drainage and utility easement that was vacated at that point in time. The applicant is requesting a 7 by 25 foot concrete pad for display purposes. They have got an existing tenant, which is UFC Farm Supply, and they have the most southerly tenant bay. And they would like to be able to display lawn and garden type equipment that is sold on site at that display pad. The subject site, this gives you kind of an idea with the adjacent properties. I included Tri-State Bobcat here because they were approved with a planned unit development a few years back and actually do have a number of different display pads on site for their equipment, and then also everything is landscaped around the equipment. This site is to the north of the other industrial properties and within the industrial zone. The property directly across the street is the Canton restaurant, Chinese restaurant. The subject site, let me go back. The subject site, the lot actually comes up to about the west side of the sidewalk here. And this planter median is 10 feet wide. They're asking for a 7-foot wide concrete display pad. So there's also a request for a variance to allow the display pad to be located 3 feet as opposed to 10 feet from that east front yard property line. As far as the application itself For display pads, the ordinance includes that they are allowed in the industrial park district, but they do need a conditional use permit review. That's why the application is before you this evening. The proposal does meet or will meet all of the performance standards of the ordinance for display pads, which are outlined in the recommendations part of the planning report. As far as the subject site, when taking a look at variances, the Planning Commission and staff, we need to take a look at what are the practical difficulties. Is there something on site that makes this a unique situation to account for granting a variance? And in this case, this property was purchased after the building and the site were constructed. It's existed like this since the early 60s. So the property owner is not the designer of the site. They have purchased it years later. The site has parking basically located directly to the east of the building. There are 4 or 5, I believe there's 4 entrances to various tenant spaces which run east and west. The subject property for UFC is in this part of the site. They have primarily do sales with contractors, although someone from the public could go purchase some equipment at the site. But when you look at the property and take a look at the exterior, it's really not set up to be a retail type operation. The windows are very small, they're covered. There is only a small area within inside the building that there is display area. It's less than 1,000 square feet. The majority of the floor plan is for storage and also servicing of the equipment that they sell on site. The application with the proposed pad as shown will remain the same in terms of the existing and proposed green space. Green space is calculated and defined in the ordinance as a percentage. So even though we're adding more hard space, the 725 square feet, it's not enough to change the percentage of green space on site. So the existing site has 12% overall green space, and they will continue to have 12% overall green space when the application, if the application is approved. The green space within the parking lot is primarily shown as this area to the north, this pad, and then a small area in this location is all considered to be parking area green space, and that is at 8%, which exceeds the required amount or the minimum amount of 3%. They also have the amount of parking that's required based on the uses in the building. And what they are looking to do is to be able to display new outdoor power equipment on the display pad. The business is not open on weekends. They do have hours of operation that at the earliest, they're open at 7:30 in the morning. The latest, they're open until 5 o'clock in the evening. Again, primarily providing service for contractors with lawn services, selling fertilizers, those types of things, and also doing the maintenance. In terms of the site, some of the issues or the items that are required by the ordinance is that there does need to be year-round landscaping provided around display pad areas. What staff is recommending is that the display pad be set back 3 feet from this east property line, and that they provide a landscape plan showing year-round plantings, basically on these 3 sides. Also, in addition, there really are no trees on the site, with the exception of one in the back part of the site. So we are suggesting and recommending with that that a couple of trees and some plantings be provided in this area, just northeast of the building, and also within the planter island here as well. And this would meet then the requirements of the ordinance for display pads to have landscaping. It would also bring the site it would be similar to other properties to the north and south that have the additional plantings, basically along this area of their property or in the front yards. The applicant is not proposing any lighting. There's no lighting or signage that's proposed. This is also conditions of display pads that you cannot have exterior lighting and additional signage. As far as the subject site, there is part of this area, I believe it's 10 feet, that is part of a drainage and utility easement from when this was platted. So in order to do this, they would need to enter into an encroachment agreement with the city engineer to have the display pad within this area. It's something that is not controversial or not out of the ordinary. We often do have encroachment agreements for parking lots and hard surface areas within drainage and utility easements. So that is another item that is recommended as a condition. With that, staff is recommending approval of the application. It looks like there are a lot of conditions, and indeed there are, but all of the conditions, with the exception of number 11, the encroachment agreement, and the number 1, which is the setback, along the 3-foot setback, all of them are straight from the zoning ordinance, and they are all the standard performance criteria that go along with exterior display pads. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. I appreciate all your information. Commissioners, questions for Ms. Garros?
I have a quick question.
Commissioner Workman.
Thank you, Deb. Can you go back to the satellite photo that shows Tri-State Bobcat?
Oops. Yep, Tri-State Bobcat is right down here.
Do they have a different type of
Actually, they're this whole parcel here.
landscaping requirement than this applicant would have?
They do, because they're in a B3 zone, so the B3 landscaping is a little bit different. This is also a planned unit development, so there were deviations and offsets
Okay.
that were approved for Tri-State Bobcat.
We did a lot with the, around the back of the property.
Yes, they also have some outdoor storage that is off the,
So there
it's,
was a
yep,
bunch of stuff that came together at that
Exactly.
property.
I just wanted to make sure it was consistent, but that makes sense,
Yes.
so thank you.
The reason that we included it is to show that a display pad within this neighborhood is not out of character. There are other display pads, and just wanted to include that because it happens to be property next door, across the street.
This is near where I live, and so I have no problem with it as a resident and as a planning commissioner. Thank you.
Commissioner Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In condition 10, the equipment should be disabled to prevent them from being started and operated.
Yes.
I have a sense that these are not particularly large pieces of equipment. How about them walking away at night?
That's something that is up to the applicant. Usually they will put something in so that they can, either chain them or lock them. It's not a requirement as far as the zoning ordinance is considered, but usually people who have display pads, either that's cars or bigger equipment that you can't walk away with, but for these smaller ones, that's typically what's done.
Okay. thank you.
Tri-State brings theirs in at night.
That can be done as well.
Commissioner Benke.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was reading the same thing, Exmark, no idea what that is, but Boss Plows, clearly if it's a plow, they're gonna bring it out either on a truck or by itself. SnowX, I don't think you're gonna see an Echo or a Steel piece of equipment sitting out there, because I think that is the case. I think that, the rental place down the way had a pad, I don't think it's there anymore now. They had a pad out front where they were doing the same thing.
I believe so,
That was about 5 buildings north of here.
yes.
I did notice, again, from the satellite photo that, clearly the building immediately south of this one already has the trees in place, so obviously adding trees will help continue that. I think those of us who've been to the comp plan meetings, there is some talk of goals through this area, so I think that we're helping that out. I've got a little bit of a math issue here, I think. If they're allowed a 7-foot display pad and their parking lot is 10 feet from the property line, and they have to be 3 feet from the property line, I think that puts the display pad on the curb in the parking. I'm just saying if we're requiring them to be 3 feet, we might actually be forcing them onto their parking lot.
No, there is enough that I took the measurement from the back of curb
Okay,
to here, so they should be able to accommodate that without an issue.
okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep, that's very.
Then the other
good
thing was it's allowed to be up to 3 feet higher, and I saw that in the conditions as well. And assuming that it's not just set 3 feet higher and there's no ramp to get there, a ramp would not be part of this, correct?
point. Correct.
Okay, so if they're gonna put it higher and they're gonna have a ramp to it, the ramp has to be part of the 7 by 25.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would assume getting as close to the parking lot curb as possible would assist them in getting equipment on and off of it,
Snow,
probably.
yeah, plowing snow gets a little hard though, but.
Yeah, I drove by and there was a
again,
fair amount of snow there yesterday, so I
Yeah.
couldn't see the sidewalk, but I
This
could
is-
get a feel for the area,
Yeah,
so.
this is Minnesota and we're gonna see it for a while now.
Commissioners, other questions for staff? Anybody have any questions for the applicant before I open the public hearing? This is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing and ask anyone in the audience that would like to step up to the podium and speak to this item to certainly do so. If you do, please give us your name and address for the record. Seeing nobody rushing to the podium, I am going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, unless there's further discussion, I think I would stand for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Benke.
I would move that the planning commission recommend to city council approval of the CUP to allow the 175 square foot concrete display pad with the 7-foot front yard setback variance subject to the following 11 conditions as noted.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Singh. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. That'll go in front of the city council on December 20th. I think I wrote that down, December 20th. Thank you for
Thank you.
doing business in Burnsville. We appreciate your time. That brings us to item number 5 on our agenda, which is updates. And our December 26th meeting has been canceled. Unless you guys want to show up, we could certainly do that if we need to. And I think that puts us to January 9th as our next
Yes,
meeting.
that's correct.
Commissioners, any updates this evening? None?
None beyond that.
We have the draft
Draft
of the,
agenda.
of the
For your next meeting.
next meeting. Thank you very much. Without,
Mr. Chair, I don't have an update, but I would just like to take this opportunity to wish commissioners and staff have a happy holidays, for our last meeting for the holidays, and very safe and prosperous 2017. 2016 has been a very good one for our planning commission. We had a good agenda for the year. We have accomplished almost every item on the agenda. I was looking at it today, and I'm very proud to be part of this group that works so hard for the people of Burnsville. So happy holidays, all the best for 2017.
thank you, Commissioner Singh, I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Slaney, and we'll see you again in January. We appreciated having you back. Thank you very much. With no other items on our agenda, I would stand for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Commissioner Levy, second by Commissioner Benke. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
very good evening and have a safe drive home. Thank you.